So if you've spent any amount of time photographing on a sunny day, you understand the problems that heat waves can cause to your image. Best case scenario, you have a slightly blurry image. Worst case scenario, you have an autofocus system that might not work at all. As far as editing goes, I used to think there's not a whole lot you could do. Regular sharpening doesn't always look very good on a heat wave affected image. But ever since Topaz released Photo AI and now version 2 of that, I think it helps a lot more than it used to. So I'm going to look at this wolf image here, which was taken right around sunrise. So a lot of the landscape is still in shade, so it's a lot of blue image, which I really like. But the sun was just coming up at the right angle to hit the wolf, and only the wolf. But for whatever reason, the heat waves were really bad here. So when we open it up, you'll see a little bit of blurriness, a lot of noise. But we're going to send it over to Topaz and see what it can do. So when you download Topaz and you install it, it should automatically apply it to be a plugin in both Lightroom and Photoshop. So I'm going to be starting from Lightroom here. And the way you're supposed to do it, according to Topaz, is starting with the raw image. I've done no editing or anything like that to this image, so it's totally raw. So you're going to go up to File, go down to Plugin Extras, and then Process with Topaz Photo AI. And that's going to send the whole raw file over to Topaz. And that way you're using Topaz to start with a totally fresh image. Topaz is going to denoise it, sharpen it, whatever it needs to do. And then you're going to go back to Lightroom and start editing from there. So with this Topaz Photo AI 2, it's going to automatically decide what it wants to do to an image. So it's chosen removing noise and sharpening here. And so I know that I want to do both of those. And then I also want to upscale it because I'm planning to crop up quite a bit. And so if you hold down the mouse key, you'll see the before and after. So it's not a huge difference right now. I'm going to zoom in a little more. And you can start to see the heat waves when I zoom in this far. It's basically a giveaway for heat waves when you see these sort of wavy things going on in the background. And then the wolf was actually howling, so there's a little bit of spiraling going on here from the heat waves from just the breath. I don't remember the temperature this morning, but had to have been pretty cold, and I think we were shooting over a creek or something that may have been warmer. And so even though we were far away from the road here, a few hundred yards at least, whatever was causing the heat waves were definitely noticeable this day. So clicking up here, I have an update for Topaz, so I'm going to go ahead and do that first before I continue. So I'm back in Topaz now, freshly updated, which I definitely recommend doing every time you open it. They do a lot of updates on bugs, adding new features, etc. But so I've got the default settings on for upscaling, removing noise, and sharpening. Upscaling is pretty self-explanatory. You can change how many times bigger you want to make the image, so I just have it at 2x right now. You can enter the number of pixels, whatever you want to do here. The AI model here, it defaulted to high fidelity. So I'm just going to click through each one. You can kind of see the slight difference. I'm just going to leave it on high fidelity right now. That's what they defaulted to. The next thing is going to be removing noise. And so if I leave it here at the defaults here, you'll have to hold down the mouse to do before and after, but you can see it removed quite a bit of noise. I'm going to turn off the minor deblur and then slowly decrease the strength of the denoising until noise starts showing back up. So see here at 10, still totally gone. Go down to 5, 4. Takes a second to load, but you can still see the noise is totally gone there. So I'm going to go all the way down to 1 and see what happens. So yeah, the background noise is totally gone here. There might be a little bit in the wolf. So I'm going to go bring it back up to 5. Do before and after. I think that's good balance. We'll have to work on the sharpening of the wolf next. Overall, with the new updates, I think this is pretty impressive for how far zoomed in we are. So if this is the original image size, you can see just how much zoom we're in. We'll go all the way back in here. So right now, usually it'll auto detect the subject. It hasn't done that here, so I think what I'm going to do is click on select subject, and this is going to let you mask in the subject. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller here, change the brush size, and I'm going to brush in just around the wolf. Go to add, then brush it in just on the wolf here, so that way it's only applying the sharpening to the wolf. I really don't want it to be in any of this background area. What it was doing is sharpening some of the heat waves, and obviously we don't want to do that. So I'm also going to, I want it to sharpen a little bit of the landscape, so what I'm going to do is turn the feathering all the way up, increase the brush size again, and just brush in this background or the foreground area. I don't want to look too unnatural with the rocks being unsharp, but the wolf being very sharp. So then I'm going to zoom back in and fine tune that a little bit, add back just the edges. Don't want to get too far up into the background or it's going to start sharpening those heat waves again. Just check and add in a few of these rocks. You could be a lot more careful with this, spend more time and really select the rocks. Kind of subtract out part of this area here. And so you see when I do this erasing, it sort of feathers out itself along the edges there. I'll go back and add in some more of this rock. It's not as important once you get away from the subject like this. Most people are going to be looking at the wolf, and a lot of this around the edge I'm going to crop out anyways, but just give you a rough idea of doing that part. I'm going to zoom back in again and just touch up the edges of the wolf a little bit more. So I use a smaller brush size here. And if you hit the left and right bracket keys above the return or enter button, you can change the brush size really fast. So you see when I go in, it kind of gives you a very sharp edge, and then once you let go, it sort of feathers that back, so just keep that in mind when you're doing that. Usually Topaz does a really good job of selecting the subject automatically. I think it was just too small in the frame in this case. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as it is, click apply. It's going to take a second to load again. And there we go. So you can see on this area at the top left, right outside the wolf's mouth, there's not the sharpening that was there before. It's a little bit on this piece of heat wave right here. So if you hover over the word subject here, it will show you what's selected. So the background's not selected, so I'm not sure why it's sharpening that section, but that's something we can go back in Lightroom and fix. We'll just reduce the sharpness with a brush later. So inside the sharpening option, you have standard, strong, lens blur, and motion blur. If you know that it's out of focus from lens blur, you can select that one. If you know it's motion blur, select that one. If it's really blurry, you can try strong, but there's a point when something's too blurry, and if you're doing too much sharpening in Topaz, you start to get really bad artifacts, and you can kind of tell when someone has topazed a really blurry image. It tries to add in fur or feathers or whatever it is, and it's just going to be kind of fake looking. I think it did a really good job on this one. There's just a couple areas, I think on the back here, on the top of the back leg is a little much. So what I'm going to do is edit the subject again. I'm going to make sure the feathering is all the way up, increase the brush size a little bit. I'm going to brush just around this edge here a little bit. That's going to erase just this part of the sharpening area. We'll see what that does. Not a huge difference, but we may use Lightroom brush to tone down the sharpening just a bit right there. But it may not matter when we're not zoomed in so far. So you can play around with the strength and denoising here. I'm going to turn the denoising all the way down because we have the removing noise up here. Let's see what difference that makes. Topaz is a really intensive program on your computer, so if you have an older computer, it's going to take quite a while to load the preview every time. So when I did that minor denoise, it seemed like it really did a little too much to the rocks, so I'm going to turn it down halfway or so. And then, so the strength, you see it's at 60%. I'm going to tone that down to 35 or so, see if that's still enough. I think that will just get rid of some of these artifacts up here. Yeah, I think it's a little too low. I'm going to go back up to 40, so. Okay, so that's sharpened it quite a little bit more, but not too much. I'm going to turn the denoise back up just a little bit, bump the strength up to 45. See what that does. So you've really just got to play with the sliders, move them up and down, decide a good balance between both of these. Along with the denoise, you can change that as well. Just, you want to get a natural look that doesn't look like it's been over sharpened. You don't want to have too many artifacts or anything like that. Then once you're done, you click Save to Lightroom here at the bottom, big blue button. Like I said, an older computer, this will take a really long time to process sometimes. It's going to save it as a DNG, which is still a raw file. So you see here, it's got 268 megabytes, and so that's going to be a pretty large file. So you're able to really still work on it back in Lightroom if you want to change the contrast, colors, and things like that. So once Topaz saves the image, it's going to automatically send you back to Lightroom, and you'll want to make sure, it should automatically do it, but just make sure that you are in the DNG file and not the original raw file. So you can see all the edits have been applied. It's a little bit of the excess sharpening here in the background, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is, up here in the top right corner is the masking brush tool. So I think I'm going to try the background and see if that, no, that's not going to work, it won't detect the background. So the next thing I would do is the linear gradient, and I'm just going to kind of drag it about here, so it's not going to go over the wolf, but it will select the majority of the background. If you hover over where it says mask 1, you'll see what's being done. But what I'm going to do is just turn down the sharpness, so that way it's not sharpening the background. So basically I turned it all the way down, and it's not too much. So hovering over to see what's applied, I'm going to move the gradient up just a little bit so we're not getting the wolf's face in there. The other thing you can do, say if you move it down to here, so that way it's going all the way down to just about where the rocks are, and then you click on subtract under the mask section up here, and if you do a brush, you can make it a little smaller, but you'll just subtract out the wolf so it's not getting applied right there. if you hover over again, you'll see the blue is not going over the wolf, but it's going on the background right behind him, which is what you want. So zooming back out, a few areas where it's not quite as close to the rock because it's not in a straight line, so you can go back and fix that if you want. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that right now. So if you just hit the enter key twice, it'll take you off the masking and back to the default screen. So what you want to do is first make sure your lens corrections are applied. So select your lens here. It may do it automatically, but you can select your lens and extender if not. This was with the 400 2.8 and a 2x extender. So we're at 800 millimeters. It's still kind of far away, which is part of the reason for the heat waves. The next thing I'm going to do is crop it. So you can hit the R key or hit the crop button up at the top. And the first thing, just in general, I'm going to get rid of the sky. I don't want any of that. I like the really uniform background. And I think this works well as a rule of thirds image. So I'm going to put this bottom right thirds intersection just underneath the wolf. And so you have options when you're choosing where to put that exactly. And so just generally you want it around the wolf area. And you can move it up and down, left and right, and kind of get a good balance. You have this white snow area in the bottom here, this white snow, and then all of this is still uniform. You just want to get a good balance of the weight of each brightness. You have a good balance of lights and darks across the image. So I think that's good there. Kind of go back and forth. Can zoom in and out just to get a good idea of the balance from different sizes. It kind of helps a good bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is make another mask. This time I'm going to do a radial gradient. And I'm just going to put it right over the wolf, drag it out a little bit like that. And I'm going to increase the clarity. It just helps draw your eye in a little bit more to that area. I'm not going to do much, just 15. Then I'm going to add 10 or 15 to the texture as well. Just kind of increases the sharpness on a bigger scale here, so it's subtle, but it's kind of helps draw your eye towards the subject, which is the wolf. I'm going to experiment with moving the exposure up. Obviously, if you go too much, it's just very obvious. So what I do is move it up and then move it back down slowly until it's not really obvious. So I've got about 0.1. I'm going to type in 0.2 there. Zoom back in again. If you press the J key, it will show your highlight and shadow clipping. So I just want to zoom in, make sure it's not clipping on the back of the wolf or anything like that. So I think that looks good. The other thing I might try is down here in effects. I'm going to go down on the vignette. Just a very subtle amount. It's usually not more than 15 or 20. I'm going to do about 15 here. If you hit the little eye right here, you can do a before and after. It's just another way of drawing the attention away from the edges and towards the middle where the wolf is at. It's just a visual way of kind of drawing your eye right to the subject where you want it. So if you're planning to post an image like this onto social media, I find that the zoomed out images that are more of a landscape don't really appeal to the audience as well. It's just people are viewing or on smaller devices like iPhones, maybe an iPad or a desktop occasionally. But the screen size is just so small that the wolf kind of gets lost. So for the sake of social media, I'll crop it in a little bit closer. If I was going to make a large print, I would probably leave it like it is. You can crop in quite a bit since we did the enlarging in Topaz. So I'm just going to try and move around, see where I like it. I do like this one with the wolf in the top third. But I also like the wolf in the bottom third. I think this one's a little more simplified. The only thing I don't like is in the bottom right is this patch of snow, but it's not something I'm going to worry about, and definitely not going to remove it or anything. So I think I like it right about there. It's big enough that you still have the feel of a landscape with an animal in it, but the wolf is big enough that it stands out, and people may click on it and zoom in to see the wolf a little bit better. Looking at the image now, I think it could use a little more contrast. We haven't done anything up here in the general sliders, so I think I'm going to take the black slider down just a little bit. This is too much. I have the alerts on so you can see when something gets to totally black, but I don't think I want it that dark. We're currently at minus 28. I think I'll leave it at minus 20. Then I'm going to do the same with the white slider to set the white point. It starts clipping on the snow pretty soon, so I may just do plus 10 or 12 there. I think that looks a lot better. It has just a general contrast there. The other thing you can play around with is the picture profile, and this is going to, it's transcoding the raw into different colors based on what Adobe wants or what the camera had. So camera neutral is a little more flat, so you see the highlights went down quite a bit. Camera standard is just sort of a middle ground. I think it's too blue there. I'm just going to go back to Adobe color and leave it there for now. So yeah, I don't think I would really do much else on this image. If you want to go ahead and get Topaz, I don't think they do any free trials anymore. You might be able to find it on their website if you're not logged in. Otherwise, it's $199 for, you can use it as long as you want. You get upgrades free for a year. And then if you want newer updates, you have to pay again. And it's well worth it as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're posting online a lot. And really good if you're making prints. They can save a lot of images like this one.